Leslie.
I'm Laurie. Welcome to Sumo
Kaboom, where we talk about all things sumo.
That's right. And this week, we are diving into the Jungyo. This time, we're going to be talking about the physical toll of the Jungyo, maybe a little bit about injuries.
But before we do that, you want to jump into a news flash?
Before we do that, can we do some poetry?
Absolutely.
Because poetry is always first on my list, and we've received a couple of poems in the last week. One is from Adam Jones. A cheeky chappy in a bright pink mawashi, our smiling Ura.
Lovely.
I know, isn't that nice?
We need to have a sumo book of poetry.
We do.
You know, like Leaves of Grass? Leaves of Grass. That was like a gold book of poetry that I don't know was like a big poetry book. Anyway, we could have a sumo book of poetry published.
Haikus.
Yes, it's a collective effort,
yes.
Which is kind of another theme of this week's episode. It's our collective effort to help solve a problem.
Okay, that's a much better way of looking at it. Okay.
Yeah.
How about this poem from Little Miss Sumo? Sparkling sumo crazed days, jam-packed with merch, matches, and ricochet close-ups. It was hot, hot, hot. Meetups planned and not. Sample pack of tuna to cap it all. Touch to Dai Yokozuna. Thank you for taking us on your Ryogoku Odyssey.
Oh, yay! Sumo, like tuna packet included.
I think she's talking about our trip to Japan, which was amazing. It's still just such a highlight memory.
Oh, man. I'm still telling everybody about it. And then I'm like, I went to like an audition or something today and I sat there and people are like, you went to Japan? I'm like, yes, I went to Japan. And you know, I do a podcast about sumo. And oh my gosh, we met this Yokozuna. And then you can see their eyes just glass over. And you're like,
gloss over.
Back to square one where no
back
one
to the
I
audition.
know. No one I know gives a rat's ass about it. But I know people out there listening give a rat's ass.
That's right. That is right. The 4th Annual Consulates Cup Sumo Tournament, which is held down at Dreamland, which is right outside of Austin, Texas. It's coming up. It's on October 26th, y'all. So if you are a sumo wrestler in the United States, particularly if you're in the Texas area, head down. Men, women, weight classes, it's all there for the taking. If you're into international sumo, head down there and join the fun.
Yeah, October is a good time of year to be in Texas because all the other times of year are really hot. So October is really nice, and Austin's a great town.
Go online and search for Consulate Cup Sumo 2024. It's put on by Dark Circle Sumo. You could also go to their website. They're amazing. Yeah, all the info's online. Head down there. I think it's $20 to $60, it looks like, to join the meet.
We've watched it, and it's like a really cool venue. They have a ton of beers like on tap. And if you don't want to participate, you can do like us. Grab a beer, kick back, and just watch a bunch of people wrestle in front of your eyeballs. They usually like have a whole Japanese presentation of like other cool art forms as well.
According to their website, this tournament will be hosted in collaboration with the Otaku Food Festival, which should have over 100 merch vendors and over 20 Asian food vendors. So seems like a really big deal. So head down there, join the fun.
They've upped their game. Go for it. Well, let's remind everybody, if you're listening for the first time, we have a raffle coming up and just a few weeks to get your tickets. The tickets are $3 each. You go to our website or you go to our social media and you click on that link in our bio and it will direct you to our Coffee KO-FI account. And you can donate to Sumo Kaboom at $3, get you a ticket. Donate $12, you get 4 tickets. And we're going to be doing our sumo merch drawing on October 31st, Halloween.
Yeah.
And it's packed full of good sumo fun stuff.
I'll post a video this week with more information about what's in each of the prize packages. You know, some people are just buying 1 ticket. Some people are buying 30 tickets. You can do this any way you want. But your name will go into the drawing and we will pick a couple of prize winners at the end of this month. And we hope you'll join us for that sort of raffle fun. And if you are a monthly supporter of us, you are already in this raffle. You do not need to worry about it. Your name is in because you support us every month. This is the least we can do. So thank you.
At least. All right, now are you ready?
Yep.
For a news flash?
Sure.
There is actually not any news, really, other than the Jungyo, which is like a regional tour that happens after every tournament. The guys go to different areas all around Japan, and it depends like how long each, little tour is. They all go, though, and they have regional crowds that come and watch them and get up and close and personal, and it's meant to like help excite young people about sumo and possibly like recruit them one day, but it's really for entertainment and it's like lighthearted, but the guys do practice. So it's like you sit in an arena. We sit in an arena and then there's all kinds of things that happen. There's folk singing. There's always the baby crying event where the wrestlers take a small child and the child's dressed up like a yokozuna. Usually they bring them up on the doyo, they raise them up into the air, they touch their feet to the ground and lift them back up. And the child is supposed to be screaming bloody murder at this point. And they usually are. And that's good because that means they're strong and that they can keep all evil spirits away, I'm sure. So it's that kind of thing. And then they do they do keiko, and the guys, they demonstrate all kinds of things, how they do their hair. It's really kind of a show and tell of sumo for fans to get even more up close and personal. And the Kokugikan tournament, like that's a game face. Those guys are coming in, they're fighting for prize money. The spirit of the Jungyo is a little bit more fun, easygoing. It's meant to engage a crowd and keep them entertained. But along with that, there was a really great article this week by John Gunning, and he was talking kind of about the injuries. And that's kind of the news I have is that every time one of these Jungyos happens, they have a week off and then they all go on these Jungyos. And these can be 20 days long. They might have a day off here or there, but they're still practicing in the morning for real. And then they're performing in the afternoon for crowds. And a body can only take so much. So a lot of these guys, sometimes they're allowed, yokozunas, they are allowed to, they'll come and show up a little bit, but maybe not the whole time. Some of the higher ranked guys, their injuries kind of prevent them from, entertaining the crowds, and they start to pull out. And so that's kind of the news is that, Takayasu and Wakataka Kage injured himself again. It's another opportunity to injure yourself as well, because they are doing practice bouts in front of audiences too.
All on top of their normal practices in the morning. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
And this John Gunning article was really great because he offered up some suggestions of hey, there might be another way to do this to actually give the guys a little bit more rest because the injuries can never really heal, even in a young body. They can't heal up if you're constantly aggravating it. And he had a good solution of well, how about the West performs one day and the East does the next, or the West side does 10 days and then the East side does 10 days, that kind of idea.
Sounds like a great idea.
Right? And I don't think audiences would, I think people want to see their favorite wrestler. But me personally, I'd be if Kirishima is injured, I don't want him to come out and wave at me and smile at me and do barely sumo or hurt himself again. I want him to continue to be in top fighting form. So I'd be okay if I didn't get to see him, on a Jungyo. So it was a really great article. And I recommend you all reading it because he cares about the sport and he knows a lot about other sports and how other sports have tackled even deeper, injury issues, even long-term ones like rugby or concussions and things like that. What kind of protocols are in place to make sure that the guys are taken care of the moment the injury happens, but also there's protocol for how long these guys rest in other sports, So I thought, wouldn't it be good to kind of talk about some of these common injuries and really kind of sadly their severity. And then all of us will have a better understanding of when we watch our wrestler maybe not have a Kachikoshi record, we might understand a little bit more about some of their past injuries and what might still be aggravating them.
Well, something you said earlier just kind of interested me. I wonder, that John Gunning article mentioned one thing that, football and rugby players have that sumo wrestlers don't, which is someone watching what they're eating. So someone's watching their dietary intake, and someone's on top of exactly what's going in and making sure it's all the right foods to be able to support a body of that size in just the right way.
Right.
And that's something that sumo wrestlers don't have.
I know. I watched sumo food and I've been like, there is no way that all that mayo on a bunch of chicken nuggets is going to sustain your health for the long term.
Yeah. I wonder why. Or have you ever heard of like Kisenosato stable having, didn't his stable have like a chef? Don't some of the really fancy stables now have chefs employed?
I think with him and his sports science graduate degree, he probably took some of his learning there and was like implementing it. And I know they probably still have chanko nabe because that's standard, right? But probably some of these younger guys that go back to school or do a dual degree or have really looked into it, who are studious, they've probably looked into improvement when it comes to nutrition and diet.
It seems like that would be a real easy change to make.
Yeah, because you hear Tadanofuji is like battling diabetes this whole time, know? And it's like, what is that like to have the pressure of Hakaku constantly asking, when is he going to be back? He should be back. At the same time, you're trying to wrestle, be the best. And also underneath it, you have diabetes that you can't get under control.
And
right?
Wouldn't it be so much easier for somebody like Tadanofuji to be able to manage that diabetes if he had a nutritionist or a team of chefs that were helping him eat the way he needs to eat all the time to get the, enough protein intake and whatever else you need to do to be able to keep your diabetes under control? I mean,
I think young guys are going to have to change it. I mean, the old guys that are running the stables, they're like, well, you'll do it the way I did it.
Well, it just makes me wonder, like when you've got your youngest wrestlers coming in and they're training, but then they're doing all of the cooking for everyone else.
Yeah, what does a 15-year-old know about?
Exactly. What does a 15-year-old know about feeding someone with diabetes?
Well, and he has his stable recipes he's been handed down. That's what he's learning to do.
And shouldn't there be someone on call that they could be like, all right, my top wrestler here has diabetes. What do I need to be thinking about when I'm making these? Maybe that's already out there. I don't know. But that would be such a huge help for all of these sumo wrestlers.
If it was consistent across all of the JSA.
Yeah.
Then that would be great. There would be kind of a code of nutrition that they could all kind of follow.
Yeah. Yeah. The idea that John Gunning had about changing a tour so that only half the guys were out at a time really would, let's say the benefits of that would be if you're not out on tour, you get a lot more downtime and rest time, which I imagine is very important for a high impact sport. What would be some of the other benefits of that?
I think they have such a hard time recruiting people because it is such a brutal sport. So I think for recruitment purposes, if you could elevate this old, stodgy old system, some of these young, wrestlers that have recently retired that are becoming oyakata, if they can essentially turn the head of the JSA, then maybe it will become standard. Maybe in time, some of those old guys and their techniques or some of those things that don't help the wrestlers long term, like fighting through the pain, they lose their ranking if they're injured. To be able to not lose their rank, that's such a huge part of it. And I know that's a huge part of the sport, but that's also why the guys consistently wrestle through pain and bad injuries, Yeah,
you're just making me think. I mean, I don't know. Changing rules within the sport. I feel like
nothing's going to happen fast.
Well, and I feel like I have no power over that. I mean, rules are rules, but things that
just
are
like
easy to change.
Yeah, but we all had a really hard time with the medics that were like, why are there not medics in the arena? Like, why are they not on the floor? And that pressure that was put on the JSA by Japanese fans, international fans. Everyone was like, y'all are crazy. Y'all are living in another era. Please, please find a way to do this. And they listened, right? They do know that there are people out there that care. It just, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, the early bird gets the worm. Like, those are not the same.
Well,
like, if you get loud about something, then maybe change does happen. And I know that's Pollyanna, but especially with that kind of organization. But I believe.
But it seems like your point is, if all of us fans stick together and get loud about certain issues, maybe things will change. Am I right?
Yeah. I mean, and the sport has been growing, right? It really has. The attention that's been brought to the sport has grown. They'll continue to get more and more critique if they don't address some of these age-old kind of rules that don't protect wrestlers. And the sport will dwindle out. Like, they won't have enough recruits because it's not attractive to people. But if you modernize in some way and evolve, which the organization has evolved throughout history, it's just at a much slower pace, but it can evolve. And if you get loud enough, then yeah, maybe in time, some change can happen that might protect these guys from long-term injury.
If we get loud enough, maybe we can get personal chefs for every single one of these guys.
Let's get loud. Let's get loud.
I mean, yeah, we can talk about their nutrition. Their injury-wise, the only thing I feel like we could get loud about and make any sort of change about, maybe, is the tachi. There have been discussions about changing the tachi back to what it was before, which is you tachi without having to put your hands on the ground.
Right.
Because of injury in the neck, because of possible CTE. I spent yesterday going down the rabbit hole of injuries, and there's, I just looked at a lot of science around, the injuries that people get in high contact sports, many of which, we can't really do anything about. You would have to change the sport itself. Right. But one of the really horrifying statistics I came upon was 91% of collegiate top-level sumo wrestlers and 79% of high school top division sumo wrestlers have experienced intense burning pain around the neck. It's called burner syndrome, and it's one of the most common injuries seen in sumo. I mean, that's a horrifying number to me. High school and college that are experiencing, and this doesn't mean it's happening all of the time, and we don't know if it's, long-term damage, but there are many studies that have been done on the necks of sumo wrestlers and compared them to the necks of football wrestlers and the necks of rugby players. And sumo wrestlers' necks seem to have less strength. And I don't know if I could say more injury, but there's certainly evidence that there's a narrowing of like the cervical, what they call the nerve root foramina. So there's like a narrowing of the space that the spinal cord goes in. There's a deformity or less lordosis, so less curve in the neck itself as kids are going through high school and up into college. Like the neck is changing shape from what it would be normally. And
you have that little hump on the back, or maybe it's just me that has a hump on my back. But that little
I'm not talking about
swoop.
That. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the bones themselves, like the cervical bones, the spine in the neck. Like almost 50% of kids who are in college for sumo have bone spurs or joint damage or the beginnings of arthritis in their neck from sumo.
Wow. Which explains why Atami Fuji has osteoarthritis in his right hip.
Well, no, we have to be careful. I mean, that's where I get really uncomfortable. Like, we have to be careful. We can't
Do you think it's genetic? You think it's genetic or it's because of sumo?
It might be because he's a big kid. I mean, it might be. There's so many reasons.
Right.
But there's enough science
there's enough science to go. A lot of them have arthritis. That's a common denominator too.
Actually, and see, here's where I'm like, we have to be so careful. because we don't know if this means there's any pain involved, but there's enough x-rays of their necks to show that there's a loss of the natural curve in the neck. There's the beginnings of bone spurs or arthritis. They may have no trouble with that in the future, but 50% of their necks, their spines, like their bones in their neck are changing, and it's a result of sumo. And an easy, well, I won't say easy, but one of the ways that we could make sure that their necks stay safer is possibly to change that tachiai, because enough of them experience that burn or that tingling. I remember that Takayasu, the three-way playoff, Takayasu, Abi, that is like the main reason that I still am like, I don't like Abi, is because of that terrible neck injury that Takayasu got.
Yeah.
And those kinds of things, we can't get rid of them completely.
No, I mean, the guys signed up for that. You know, that's what they signed up for.
So the way that happened with Takayasu is they both had their hands down, and then Abi did a hanka, and Takayasu sort of hit it in a weird way, and his arm got, like his neck got thrown in a weird position. So if the tachiai had been different, the sumo would have been different and might not lead to as much injury to things like necks. I guess that is my point.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah. And it's all like maybe. But if you just
we'll never know. We'll never really know for sure. But you can kind of like look at the sport and go, okay, these are common injuries. What everyone notices, these are the common injuries. So what do we do about it? Kids are getting hurt. People have long-term injuries. They will fight these injuries for the rest of their lives. How can we protect them and still keep the sport alive and fun for us to watch without losing any of the flair?
What I didn't look into was CTE. I didn't even search to see if they're starting to do any sort of research on sumo wrestlers and CTE, because that's another one that comes up.
I know
often.
it's this thing that we never want to talk about. And of course, like I am not qualified to talk about it, but I can say, watching American football, fans got loud, and the sport, a bunch of people are like, that's just the way football is. Yeah, well, they gave people who had neck injuries different kind of pads. They've continued to evolve. And yes, we are not a consensus culture over here, but you can make noise and change can happen. And you do see it in that sport happen. You see some improvement, there's concussion, like they take them off immediately. They observe them and say, do you have concussion? You bring them back in if they don't. But also people who have had CTE, who have been diagnosed with it, are also championing these. Basically, they're like someone like Tony Dorsett. You remember Tony Dorsett from the Dallas Cowboys heyday? Mm-hmm. Tony Dorsett. He was diagnosed with CTE in 2013. And there were a bunch of football players, American football players, who were like, okay, it looks like I have some of these symptoms. Okay, erratic behavior, forgetting things, sometimes aggression, that kind of stuff. And there have been some truly nightmare things that we've discovered about CTE. And yeah, a lot of parents don't let their kids play football anymore because they know the truth of that. But on the other side, because someone like Dorsett is out there, he's in the news, and is saying, like, I know what it's like. We didn't know at the time what we were doing to ourselves, but I'm here to tell you what it's going to be like later in your life if you're not taking precautions for this thing, right? That's truly awful. And he says he has more bad days than he does good days, right? He's not the only one. Like, the number of guys in football that have CTE or symptoms of CTE, it's more than you'd ever really want to know. So, when you watch sumo, you're like, I love sumo. This is what tears me apart sometimes when I watch it. And I know other people do too. They see it and they're like, why am I ignoring this sport that like is tough and it's brutal? And you kind of are like left being like, well, I'm just going to look the other way and just love the sport and not think about that. But if you truly love the sport, you can get loud and you can talk about it. All of us collectively, people who have podcasts, people who have, John Gunning, who has an article about injuries, longstanding injuries. People start a conversation, and sooner or later, the powers that be that need to hear it start to hear it. At
the very least, it seems like there could be some rules about, let's say you have a head bonk when you're doing sumo. If you have a brain injury or a neck injury and then you just go back in immediately, the chances are really high that you're going to make it worse. So at the very least, there should be some rules or some protocol put in place for people that are banging their heads together during sumo, you would think, right?
Right. Or like you said, I don't really care that they don't tachi quite like they used to. Or maybe this young generation who's going to get the nutrition in line, not everybody goes in with their head. You see someone like Shodai and we're always like, why is Shodai up so high at tachi? Well, he doesn't bonk his head quite like Takakeisho or Hokuto Fuji does. There's got to be a way for these guys to learn different techniques of how to tachi get the advantage, but then not lead with your noggin, lead with your chest.
One of our listeners sent us a video.
Yes.
After our last episode about high schools, like sumo high schools.
Yes.
And I watched this video, and in this video, it's this kid who, I don't know, looks like he's in junior high, maybe beginning of high school, and he's at the teppo pole, and he's hitting the teppo pole just like they usually do with the palm of their hands, but every single time he's hitting his head on this teppo pole at the same time. So he's going like head in hand, head in hand, heading head, just like banging his head against his tempo pole over and over and over again. And I thought,
give me this kid's phone number. I'm calling him, and I'm going to be like, kid, it ain't worth it.
Well, yeah. And then you're like, well, maybe that's how they all trained. That's maybe you've got
day
to
one
learn
sumo.
That.
Go bang your head against a wall.
Yeah, and then I'm like, who am I to say it doesn't work? But then I'm like, surely there should be some more science experiments on this. I don't know.
Let's push for some more science experiments. Anybody have a science experiment? Let's run a hypothesis.
That doesn't seem like it would be a good thing to do, but
I know we're way out of our league here. Look,
that's what makes me so uncomfortable talking about it.
But you know what, Lara? There are people out there who watch the sport, love the sport, care about the sport, care about the wrestlers so much, right? They are not disposable to us. We celebrate them as individuals and fans, probably better than maybe the guys on the inside. They're like, that's just another young kid who may drop out in a couple of years. Who knows? But I don't think it's beyond us to care and have the conversation. And that's all this episode really is just to be like, okay, do I need to see my favorite wrestler in a Jungyo that I paid money for? Am I going to complain that Takakeisho's not there? Or am I going to complain, because he needed time off? Am I going to complain to the powers that be that this is what the fans want, right? No.
I never complain about the Jungyo.
Yeah, nor do I.
I never complain about it.
And trust me, I'm dying to go. I will go.
In fact, if I had my perfect Jungyo in mind, it would just be kids and singing. I could skip the sumo.
No, I like the hairstyling thing. I do like that.
Okay, they can bring the hairstyling, and I want them in mawashis.
I like the comedy routine.
They can do the comedy routine. Yeah, I love that. I want the outfits. I want to see the buns.
They can do the parade.
They can walk around just in their mawashis and sing, and I will be absolutely fine. That is all I need on a Jungyo.
Or shaking my hand.
Oh my God. See, that would be the best. And just bring out half the guys at a time so they only have to deal with fans half the amount of time.
And then they bring in a Jumbotron. And then on the Jumbotron, they do the best highlights with super awesome graphics from the last tournament.
Then they bring in a whole bunch of massage therapists and they give these guys massages on the stage. And we get to watch how the massage therapists are dealing with these large bodies. But these guys are just loved up for 2 hours, and we just get to watch it.
Laura, that's not a bad idea. If there was a demonstration, I would 100% watch a Jungyo demonstration on the physical therapy that a wrestler goes through post bout. Like,
Yeah, let me
I would
watch that.
100% watch that.
Let it be restorative. I don't really necessarily need to watch the sumo. I will watch them
and
heal.
give the
I will watch
guys
their
a
therapy.
chance to rest. So all of that to say, read John Gunning's article. Think about what part we play in this. Not that we can change everything overnight, but let's have a conversation about how can the collective speak up a little bit, make people listen, and say, hey, we care about these guys and we care about their health. What can we do to let you all know that, like, we will still watch the sport if you protect these wrestlers a little bit better than they have been in the past? Do you say that's fair?
That's fair.
Yeah.
Let's
Here's
just
what
change.
I'm doing.
Let's change the Jungyo.
I am getting the conversation. I'm continuing the conversation from John Gunning's really great article. And I cannot say John Gunning's article 5 times over because I keep saying John's Garticle.
John, I think you could shorten it to John's Garticle. And I think we should start our own Garticle that is like how we would change the Jungyo. And it should involve massage therapy. It should involve
PT demonstrations.
How many people would pay money to watch these guys work out in the gym? Hello, me.
Absolutely. They could make us so much money on like closed circuit, like just live feed into the sumo gym. You know how much money the JSA could make just watching, like us
them
just
take a
watching
nap.
Tedana Fuji just pump an iron or something?
Okay, here's the way it should be. They show up in the morning. They, of course, have their mawashis on, and they sing for us. They hold a few little kids, and then they take a nap on stage, and we watch them sleep. And then they wake up, and then they get their physical therapy, and they get their massages, and then, like, we go watch them swim or something, like relaxing.
Therapy.
Yeah.
Water therapy.
They don't have to do
Aqua
anything.
therapy.
And then we give them a nice meal where they can eat all they want to eat, and we just get to watch them eat.
I think that exists, sort of, but not in these kind of channels, sumo channels.
And it's only half of them at a time, so we don't get everybody.
Great. Everybody gets to rest a little.
Yeah, and maybe they answer a few questions.
Jungyo was a belly touching event. Nobody's getting hurt in a belly touching event.
Right.
Like,
let's do
more
that.
belly touching events, less just get right back on the road after the Basho ends with your injuries. And
so let them
make us
physically
smile.
rest, because there's plenty of other things that us fans would pay to go see.
Yeah.
Just, they don't need to do sumo every day. That's really the problem with the Jungyo. Expecting them to do more sumo outside of their normal training.
Right.
Yeah, in Jungyo.
Letting their bodies rest for the appropriate period of time.
Yeah. And get them a chef. A chef.
All right.
Yeah. I'm very happy with that.
Me too. We'll settle with that.
Okay.
That is our episode on Jungyo's injuries and thoughts on John Gunning.
You did it again.
John Gunning's article. Next week, who knows what we'll have for you, but I'm sure it will be hopefully interesting. And until then, I'm Leslie.
Bye. See you later.
Bye.